The Senate will come to order. Senators will be in their seats and the clerk will call the roll.
Alley. Baumgardner. Berger. Billinger. Boyer. Bowers. Braun. Denning. Dahl. Estes. Vascato. Francisco. Givens. Goddard. Haley. Hardy. Hawk. Hensley. Hildebrand. Holland. Kirshen. Longbine. Lynn. Masterson. McGinn. Miller. Olson. Peterson. Petty. Pyle. Rucker. Skubal. Solentrop. Sykes. Taylor. Thompson. Tyson. Wagle. Ware. Wilborn.
Senators and their guests, please rise and give prayerful attention to our Senate chaplain, Pastor Washington.
Please join with me in prayer. Gracious God, thank you for this moment that is set aside for prayer. In Matthew chapter 6, verse 6, your word speaks of going into a closet and shutting the door to pray. More than anything, more than whatever may be going on in the world around us, we need to personally and individually hear from you. So, Lord, right now, as we go into prayer, help us to shut the door. Help us to avoid the distractions that come when we try turning our thoughts to you. For sometimes when we try to pray, instead of connecting and talking with you, we find our minds wandering, and we wind up self-talking, talking to ourselves about whatever, even about what we're going to do when we finish prayer time. Lord, for our prayers to get past the ceiling and truly enter your throne room of grace, we need you, by your powerful Holy Spirit, to connect with our frail human spirits. So, Lord, for the next few moments, even as I've been leading us in prayer, I'm going to shut my mouth for a few quiet moments so that your still, small, quiet voice might break through and be heard by each of us. We'll now shut the door to distractions. And I'm asking each of us to pause for a moment of silent prayer. Lord, I thank you for the privilege of prayer and for these few moments spent in the closet. In the precious name of Jesus, amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For a point of personal privilege, the chair recognizes a senator from Sedgwick County, Senator Faust Godot.
Thank you, Madam President. It is my honor today to have some VIP guests with us today in the VIP section here on the Senate floor. Madam President, I'm honored to have with me Dr. Charla Smith, PhD, MPH. If she would stand, please. She is here today with graduate students from KU Medical School, Health Policy and Law class of the Masters of Public Health program in Wichita and the Kansas City campus. They are all Masters of Public Health and MD students, Madam President. The class focuses on mortality, maternal mortality, health policies, and prevention medicine. Madam President and colleagues, did you know that African American infants are 3.5 times more likely to die than Caucasian infants? And if you look at it like this, Madam President, it results to one kindergartner class per year. Madam President, I am honored to introduce each one of them. And then if you would sit as I say your name so that we can make the distinction, that would just be marvelous. Again, we have Dr. Charla Smith, MD, MPH. She is in Wichita currently at the KU Met Center there, but she has been promoted to a position at the KU Met Center in Kansas City, so congratulations. We also have Erica Bates, if you'll wave no. We also have Maxwell Barsh. We also have Lauren Haig. We have Omar Hyatt. We have Gabrielle Hernandez. We also have Chelsea Moore. We have Caitlin Schumacher, Sierra Sykes, and Sydney Walls with us here today, Madam President. And if we would just, you know, I'm just in awe of those who want to be in the medical field to help others. So thank you so much. And Madam President, if you and the colleagues would give them a warm Senate welcome, I'd appreciate it.
Please note reference of bills and appointments on page 2 through 9 of the calendar. Introduction of original motions and Senate resolutions. The clerk will read.
Senate Resolution 1766 by Senators Holland and others, a resolution recognizing the Kansas Small Business Development Center's 2020 Business of the Year.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam President. Fellow senators, honestly, this is probably one of my most favorite days of the legislative session. And it's with great pride and pleasure that not only I, but the rest of us senators in the chamber get to recognize some really neat small business owners and entrepreneurs. Today we're here to recognize 18 Kansas small businesses that have been selected by the Kansas Small Business Development Center as this year's Small Business Award recipients. 8 of these businesses are recognized as outstanding emerging businesses, 8 are being recognized as outstanding existing businesses, and then we have 2 businesses as recognized as our outstanding exporting businesses in the state of Kansas. I put on your desk a handout of just all the good things that Kansas Small Business Development Centers do. You may know them, and if you don't, so just kind of an overview, kind of 30,000 foot. Kansas Small Business Development Centers, they develop business plans, they do marketing research and planning for growth. One of their more emerging services that they offer is business continuity planning. And we know this is particularly critical in the more rural areas of the state as we try to keep vital commercial services available for our constituents. And just my own background with Kansas Small Business Development Centers, I actually have used their services for my existing IT professional services business. I was able to reference them for some economic gardening activities that helped us make some transitions. And more recently, I'm actually using them as a startup. I cannot say enough, particularly about Will Katz and the Lawrence Small Business Development Center office. I mean, these are great people to work with, regardless of the office in the state. I mean, you can spitball ideas off them. They will help you do business plans. They'll ask you some cold, sobering questions about what you're trying to do. And at the end of the day, it really pays off. I cannot personally say enough about these folks. But to go forward to honor our small businesses today, instead of having the reader read the resolution, what I thought is I've actually reached out to some senators, and they will be announcing in this year's Small Business Award recipients. And so, Madam President, with that, I'd like to yield to the senator from Johnson, Senator Lynn.
Senator from Johnson.
Thank you, Madam President, and what a warm welcome I hope you feel from the Kansas Senate, who appreciates your work so much. As chair of the Commerce Committee and a business owner myself, my husband and I own a small business, and we understand your challenges and your victories as well. So just want to congratulate each one of you. So what I'd like to do at this point is to ask the owners of the company, when I say your name, that if you could stand and just remain standing until everybody is standing who's being recognized, and then we'll give you a huge Senate round of applause. Does that sound good? Okay. So first of all, EMP Shield from Burlington, Kansas, Timothy Carty, owner, there you are, and Peter Keegan, the general manager. Mindscope Games, LLC, Great Bend. We have Darcy and Daniel Leach, owners. LC Bioplastics, LLC, Prairie Village. Paul Black, owner. Julie Bear Don't Walk, Acupuncture, and Integrative Health, Lawrence. And that is Julie Bear Don't Walk, owner. Smallville CrossFit, Fort Scott. That's a full-service gym. And that's Lindsay and Aaron Watts, owners. The Red Rock Experience and Venue, Ulysses. It's a paranormal event venue. That sounds interesting. Tammy Lane Reese, owner. Ember Technology, LLC, Wichita. That's technology and cybersecurity management. Owners Jonathan Sanchez and Tariq Azmi. Enel Initiative, Topeka. And this is business intelligence and cybersecurity. Owners Amy Billinger and Jeremy Jackson and Jenny Jackson. Congratulations to each of you. And I now yield from the senator from Wyandotte, Senator Braun.
Senator from Wyandotte.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is my honor to recognize the existing Small Business Award winners. Again, I would ask that you please stand when your name is read, and we will recognize you at the end. The Sweet Granada Emporia, Handmade Gourmet Chocolates, Confections and Gifts. Kim Redeker, owner. Paisley Pear Wine Bar, Bistro and Market, Wine Bar, Bistro and Market, owners Sean and Heather Musel. Blue Valley Physical Therapy, Overland Park, Physical Therapy and Sports Medicine. Ann Todd Cooper and Ryan Klusman, owners. Young Sign Company of Leavenworth, in my district. Full Service Sign Manufacturing, Ann and John Hoynes, the owners. ADI Incorporated of Chanute, electric wire and cable distributor, owners Merrill and Wendy Cunningham, Dodge City Brewing Company, LLC, Dodge City, brewing and New York style pizza restaurant, owners Larry and Sherry Cook, Connie's Mexican Cafe in Wichita, Mexican food restaurant, owners Carmen Rosales, Adele Jordan, Carla Rosales Beneos, and Carmen Renteria. The Marie Antoinette Gluten-Free Baking Company in Wathena, Artisan Food Manufacturing Company, Renee Navarro Force and Sean Force are the owners. And in one other category, a separate category, the two exporting award winners that we will recognize are Sky Touch Solutions, LLC of Lenexa, an export management consulting company. The owners are Doug Obershaw and Terry Obershaw. And another export award winner, Progressive Products Incorporated in Pittsburgh, design and maintenance for pneumatic conveying systems, owner Todd Allison. At this point, I will yield back to the senator from Douglas, Senator Holland.
Senator from Douglas.
Thank you, Madam President. I very much want to thank the senators from Johnson, Wyandotte for helping me introduce this outstanding group, this great cadre of small businesses leading our state forward. Senators, you would please join me in a warm welcome of applause for our Kansas Small Business Development Center Small Businesses of the Year. And Madam President, once again, just to refer to the bodies back to the handout I put on your desk. You know, these are 18 businesses that we're recognizing today, but they're just the tip of the iceberg in all the work that the Kansas Small Business Development Centers have done across this state. The most recent data that we have on the handout you're seeing, this was their 2018 impact. In 2018, they actually worked with 278 new businesses. They created over 3,800 new jobs or retained jobs. They served over 2,500 clients. Look at that capital infusion, over $78 million. Total increase in sales from 17 to 18 for their provided clients were $183 million, and they provided over 21,000 hours of advising hours. And as you see at the bottom there, every dollar invested in the SBDC network generates $30.80 in new state and federal taxes. Just an incredible amount of work that small business development centers do every day, Madam President, for our economy and our small businesses. With that, Madam President, I would move the emergency declared, a rule suspended, and Senate Resolution 1766 be adopted by voice vote.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. It's a wonderful honor to have our award recipients with us from our small business development organizations. Correction approval of the journal. It's our intention to recess, so we can have big announcements later, but it's our intention to recess. Are there announcements? Senator from Lebec County, Senator Goddard.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to introduce a young lady who is my shadow today. She is a senior at Lebec County High School. She will be attending Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute on scholarship after she graduates. And please welcome Katea Gibbs. Where are you there? There she is.
Further announcements, Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Madam President. The Joint Committee on Information and Technology will have a brief meeting Monday at noon in 218 North. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Majority Leader from Johnson County, Senator Denning.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm fixing to make a motion to recess Senate Republicans will caucus on the 4 bills, and don't forget, we're also going to consider the appointment in the calendar. And Senate Republicans will be caucusing upon recess, room 548 South.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam President. Upon recess, the Senate Democrats will caucus in our regular room 287 North to discuss the same 4 bills and the appointment.
Okay. Majority Leader Denning.
Madam President, I move the Senate recess to the sound of the gavel.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The Senate is at recess.
The Senate will come to order. On a point of personal privilege, the chair recognizes the senator from Saline, Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today we have some special guests from my district. They are from Abilene. And as I introduce you, I'd like for you to stand, please. First, we have Kyle Campbell, who's on the board of directors for the Eisenhower Foundation. And then we have Meredith Slichter, who is the executive director for the Eisenhower Foundation. Merrill Atwater, who's a great-grandson of President Dwight Eisenhower. And Mary Jean Eisenhower, who is the granddaughter of President Dwight D. Eisenhower. So I'd like for you to join me in a special welcome to our special guest today.
The chair recognizes the majority leader from Johnson County, Senator Denning.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of bills on the calendar under the heading of General Orders.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. The chair appoints the senator from Butler, Senator Masterson, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
Having resolved ourselves in the Committee of the Whole, we're not going to turn to attention to GO. We're going to recognize Senator from Sedgwick, Senator McGinn, for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're going to have a meeting at the rail for the Senate Ways and Means Committee at this time, and if we could just stand at ease until we finish our work.
Committee, we're at ease. Committee, we're actually going to return to business. Give everybody a minute. Committee, first order of business, please turn to House Bill 255 to adopt the committee report. Chair recognizes Senator from Johnson, Senator Denning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Report's adopted. Senator from Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 255 deals with the KU Cancer Center. In 2006, the Cancer Center was born. In 2007, the legislature made an annual appropriation of $5 million. The $5 million was to have the Cancer Center seek designation from the National Cancer Institute to receive what was called clinical cancer designation, clinical cancer center designation. So that occurred in 2007. In 2012, the KU Cancer Center did receive that designation. Some of the results from receiving the clinical cancer center designation, I'll just start from the beginning. Again, 2006, KU Cancer Center was born. 2007, the legislature made the initial $5 million annual appropriation to start the process of getting the designation. In 2012, the KU Cancer Center achieved its clinical cancer center designation from the National Cancer Institute, which is referred to as the NCI. A little bit of history on how successful the KU Cancer Center has been. Prior to receiving the designation, the KU Cancer Center generated about $11 million in revenues, including clinical trials and donations and so forth. They did about 250 clinical trials before receiving their designation. After receiving their designation, they're generating around $60 million in clinical revenues and donations, and they've entered 750 clinical trials. So 75% of the clinical trials that KU has been involved in has occurred after they received their initial designation. The KU Cancer Center's treated 60,000 people, 32,000 from Kansas, around 26 from Missouri, and 1,200 from other states and other countries. The request in Senate Bill 255 is to appropriate an additional $5 million annually to the Cancer Center so they can start their journey to complete the application to be a comprehensive cancer center. If KU is successful, we'll join 51 other cancer centers in U.S. Right now, we're the only regional cancer center, and there's 51 comprehensive cancer centers in the U.S. In 2021, the Cancer Center will apply for the comprehensive designation. So I think everybody in this body, every county, every person in this chamber has either personally been affected by cancer, we've had a family member affected by cancer, or somebody very close to us. So the additional $5 million, if we can get the comprehensive designation, will build a world-class institution. That's how world-class institutions are built. Each successive generation building on the past success and setting the stage for future success. With that, Mr. Chairman, I can stand for questions.
Questions for the senator from Johnson? Seeing none, Senator, you may move your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee rise and report, it report Senate Bill 255 favorable for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Committee, please turn to 409. For the purposes of carrying 409 and adoption of the report, Chair recognizes Senator from Sedgwick, Senator McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move adoption of the committee report.
Heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Report's adopted. Senator from Sedgwick.
Thank you. Senate Bill 409 is a bill that was brought to us by the skilled nursing homes, and it's a bill that provides a bed tax to both for-profit and nonprofit nursing homes. Just to give you a little history, this bill came about probably, I think around 2009, and it had to do with trying to offset some of the decreases or the lack of increases for any kind of a Medicaid supplement to offset their expenses in their nursing homes. And for a while, it was a situation where the for-profits wanted it and the non-for-profits didn't want it. And finally, after much negotiation and a few years later, they all worked out their differences, and this bill went forward. We put a sunset on it, a 10-year sunset. So it was, I forgot, I'm the one that gets mad at people for not addressing the chair. So correct myself. Mr. Chairman, it had a 10-year sunset on it. And so here we are in 2020, and that sunset has gone away. So we had hearings on this bill again, and it's brought back to us. What this bill means to all of you is that in your local communities, that the assessment result collection would be $40 million, and it would be matched by $57 million in federal funds. We heard from, let me just get to that real quick. So we had proponents testifying, the Kansas Center of Assisted Living, the Kansas Healthcare Association, Leading Age Kansas, all testified as proponents, and they were fine with leaving the sunset off. But the committee decided that we thought it would be a good idea to continue to have a 10-year sunset. And we had a neutral testimony from the Kansas Advocates for Better Care. There were no opponents to this bill, and with that, Mr. Chairman, I stand for questions.
Questions for the senator from Sedgwick? Seeing none, Senator, move your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee rises to report, it report Senate Bill 409 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion's adopted. Bill's passed. Please turn to 225. For the purposes of carrying SB 225, Chair recognizes Senator from Sedgwick, Senator McGinn, for adoption of the committee report.
I move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Report's adopted. Senator from Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just give me a few moments to get my papers reorganized. Senate Bill 225 was brought to us by the Hospital Association, and it has to do with the hospital provider assessment. And we have had, this is another bill that we have had on the books since, I believe it was passed in 2004. Last year, we did have hearings on this in the Senate Ways and Means Committee, and did make some adjustments to this bill. Many of the adjustments had to do with the formula, the increases that they needed, the Hospital Association needed to make sure that their assessment was whole. And in the past, what had happened was they had a fee for service that KDHE would pay out, and they would go request this fee for service. But if you remember, we went to MCOs, and that changed the whole formula and how that was paid out. And what we discovered over time was that more dollars were coming out or being backfilled by the state. And so what this does is fixes their formula so that that the state does not backfill any of the decreases in the providers, the assistance for the physicians and on the provider rate. So in the first part of the bill, section 1 has to do with changing the provider rate from 1.3 to 3% for each hospital, inpatient and outpatient. It also changes from inpatient to also include outpatient. And as many of you probably know, in the last decade or so, we've had changes in our healthcare system where many times we can have a procedure and go home that same day. So that is part of why that change was made. Also, they have an assessment for hospitals that may be just starting up, so that they have a 1-year assessment, and then later on that'll go into the averaging system so that they'll be assessed exactly what's coming through their hospital at that time. If you look down to line 24 on the first page of the bill, you'll see that it's struck, and it's part of that is a technical amendment to change because the way it was written was that it was designed to pass last year. And again, because of things that happened last year, latter part of our session, the bill could not move forward. And so they had to make adjustments so that it would be current with this year. Section 2 of the bill provides the guidelines for the distribution of the money. Not more than, or not less than 80% of the assessment will be dispersed to the hospital providers, and not more than 20% of the assessment revenues will be dispersed to providers that are performing that care. If you look on down in the bill, that where it's lined out, it removes the guarantee that the rates won't be reduced and that the state won't backfill the shortfall, as I talked earlier. It also removes the language of the HMO assessment that was not approved by CMS because it was only assessed because it couldn't just assess the Medicaid MCOs. Page 3 of the bill, the top part is how you will work with KDHE to determine the distribution of funds and ensure that it is budget neutral. Line 14 has to do, from 14 on down, has to do with the people that will be on the panel that will oversee the dollars that are dispersed through that. And also you'll see some name changes, just clarification of who is on that committee. And then down at the bottom, we're just removing the duplicative language, CMS changed to the waiver, and then again, more clarifying language as well. What this means, Mr. Chairman, is that by providing this assessment rate, the difference in funding from the old formula to the new formula will be $271 million that will be brought in order to make these payments to the hospital assessment. And this bill, again, was introduced by the Kansas Hospital Association, and this, again, is last year, just to give you a little history. They were proponents of the bill. There was a representative of the Physicians Hospital Association that were opponents to this bill. I understand there may be an amendment, and I'm going to speak to the amendment when that comes, but before I do that, I would like to offer a technical amendment to the bill. And I have turned it in, and it's 3180.
Very good. We'll wait to have it distributed. Actually, this is the technical one. You can go ahead and explain it.
Okay. So because Senate Bill 225 adds outpatient revenue to the hospital assessment, this amendment corrects one reference to the inpatient revenue that was inadvertently missed before.
Any questions?
We'll stand on that.
Any questions for the senator from Sedgwick on the technical amendment? Seeing none, you may move your amendment.
I move my amendment.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion's adopted. The bill's amended. Back on the bill. Are you ready for questions?
I'm ready for questions.
For questions for Senator from Sedgwick, Senator from Johnson, Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To me, my daughter just had a baby a few months ago, and the baby was in the NICU unit for several weeks. Seen very extensive bills, so this was, I guess, a little touching to me. Here we are increasing the tax on our in and out patients. Is that right? I mean, we are raising it. I don't know. When I look at the fiscal note, it says from 1.83 to 3%. Is that correct?
Senator from Sedgwick.
That is correct, and that is assessment to the hospitals.
Senator from Johnson.
This is the problem right here with what's going on with health care. We're adding a little more tax to these young families that are struggling to get by and pay their medical bills. This is a shell game. You know, on Medicaid expansion, or when a Medicaid patient goes to the hospital, the state pays 25 cents of every dollar. Heard that in my interim. Talked to many insurance companies. Repeatedly, that's what we've heard, around that amount. The hospitals write off the rest of it, go back and ask for higher reimbursement rates. We heard last year with the Farm Bureau bill how rates have went up since the ACA 218%. But what they don't tell you is because of the higher reimbursement rates and the higher deductibles, we've seen premiums go up in the neighborhood of another 250%. We're playing shell games with our premiums. This is just another added tax on young families. How can they afford their health insurance? They've got deductibles that are $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. They're paying over twice what they were, yet they get very little for what they're paying for. And now, I know it's a meaningless tax to some people, but on $1,000, it's a little bit. But if you have a big bill, if you have a baby that's in the NICU unit, it's a lot more money that they don't have. And we keep playing this game. Just like we did with the bed tax just a minute ago, so we can get some more federal funds. You know, someone's paying that tax. Just like here, we're going to go and increase this a little over 1%. Some young family that's struggling to get by and make their payments is going to have to pay that. On top of their health insurance going up, their deductibles are probably going up. I mean, where does it end? Where does government get smaller? I mean, all I've seen in the last 7 or 8 years is spend, spend, spend. There's going to be an end somewhere in the future because we cannot keep going like we're going. We're wrecking the state, this country, with the spending. And we're wrecking our health insurance in this country. Families can't afford $10,000 or $15,000 deductibles. We're going to push them towards that if we don't turn this around. Now, I know this is a meaningless little bed tax to some people, but I'm not going to support it. Enough is enough. I'm drawing the line, and I'm saying I'm not going to support this because there's enough families in this state hurting that don't have the money to pay that extra few dollars. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further question or comment? Senator, do you wish to respond at all? Senator from Miami, Senator Baumgartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment.
I assume you turned it in?
I have. I did this week. It's 3179.
All right, give us just a minute. Senator, would you like to have it read, or do you wish to explain?
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to explain.
Please proceed.
Thank you. What this amendment does is it addresses an issue with this bill that impacts the physician hospitals in our state. So in the state of Kansas, we have 6 physician hospitals. 2 are in Wichita, 2 are in Johnson County, 1 is in Manhattan, and 1 is in Salina. So what it does is it takes the tax burden for the physician hospitals and it puts them back to the status quo. So rather than being the 3% of both inpatient and outpatient, it takes it to the status quo of the 1.83% for inpatient services. Now, I apologize, I didn't have copies available for every senator at their desk, but I have been trying to distribute it. So just so folks have a sense of what's going on, with the physician hospitals, those 6 hospitals, currently their tax is $1,258,702. And that is based on the patient revenue from 2010. With the proposed bill that we have before, Senate Bill 225, it increases their burden by 391.95%. So rather than paying $1.2 million, their obligation is changed to $9.192 million. I think anywhere that type of nearly 400% tax burden increase would be considered a usury rate. And so again, it is simply saying that we will maintain the status quo for those 6 hospitals. And I guess as a point of reference, there are many federal exceptions. CMS accepts many exceptions for hospitals as far as this type of tax. They include all of our critical access hospitals here in the state of Kansas, hospitals that are run by the state agencies, our state educational institutions, and any hospital operated by the Kansas Department of Aging and Disability Services. There was a concern that I had talked about this amendment with the majority leader, and there was a concern, would CMS accept this exception? Would they accept the carve-out for the 6 physician hospitals? And as a point of clarification with this amendment, you'll see physician-owned hospitals as defined in 42 CFR 489.3. That would be that federal code. So it's not as if CMS hasn't addressed physician-owned hospitals. We know that that federal code is already there. So I will move my amendment, Mr. Chair.
We'll stand for questions. Questions for the Senator from Miami. Senator from Sedgwick.
Address that. Thank you very much. And I do want to address the Senator from Miami's. One of our questions in caucus was, did we have a hearing this year? And we did not, and it was because the bill was, I believe, kicked out, but it went to another committee, and it was because, again, how the session progressed last year. It was sitting in there to just safely stay there. And so what we ended up doing was we put a proviso in the budget so that we could at least move this forward for another year so that we could have that discussion this year. So I just certainly wanted to clarify that. But also I want to address a little bit about the fact that you have winners and losers in this whole thing. And it's about 50-50, both whether it's a specialty hospital or whether it's not a specialty hospital. And it all depends on how many Medicaid patients you take. Specialty hospitals, yes, they're probably not winners because they don't take Medicaid's patients. They also don't have an ER room, and other hospitals have ER rooms, and they're expected to take anybody that comes through there. And specialty hospitals also don't do very much Medicaid, and again, that's why that they're not at that higher level, or they're in the negative side. Many of them don't do compensated care, which is charity care that a lot of our other hospitals do. But I'd like to share that the other reason why there's an increase, and this is important, and it's about everybody's taken about a 243% increase. If you remember what I said a little bit earlier, how we do business at a hospital nowadays as a patient is we don't generally go to the hospital and stay there. And these were based on 2010 rates. And since people aren't staying in hospitals, which is a good thing, they're having a procedure and they're coming home, what this bill does is changes it to inpatient and outpatient. And that's what that makes that change and that increase significant. But let's also remember why, again, we're doing this provider assessment increase, and it's because state funds have been used in the past, and this is to correct that action so that the money that they have now that will be sustainable as we move forward in years to come with this assessment tax.
Senator from Miami, you wish to respond?
I certainly do, and I appreciate that the senator from Sedgwick brought up the topic of hearings, because last year there was a hearing on this bill. There was one proponent and one opponent. So the Kansas Hospital Association, I believe, was the proponent, and the Physician Hospital Organization was the opponent. At no time was there a request or a demand for there to be an agreement to be drawn between those groups. And you know, the good senator in her explanation said, you know, there's winners and losers, but basically, on average, all of them are going to have a 243% increase. And I'm going to draw that distinction, that bright line, because 6 hospitals, on average, are going to pay 390% increase. Excuse me, 392% increase. That's 150% more than the other hospitals. In fact, one of the hospitals, their increase will be 2,317% increase. So that to me would be a hospital that would be a big loser. And so again, that's why I do stand by my amendment.
Senator from Saline on the Miami, or Senator from Miami's amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just have a question. I believe Salina Regional is one of the 6 hospitals you're referring to?
Senator from Miami.
I don't know the name of the hospital. I know it's in Salina.
Senator from Saline.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My guess is that if the rate increases were egregious, that Salina Regional, which is the largest hospital in Salina and next to the surgical center is the only hospital, would have contacted me in some way over the last week or two, and they have chosen to say nothing. And to me, that means that they do not think that the rate that is being asked for is egregious. And I'm also wondering about the fact that if hospitals can be charged different rates, that would, my guess is that would violate federal rules, and I would like a clarification on that.
Senator from Miami.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have an answer. The hospital in Salina is the Salina Surgical Hospital.
Okay.
Senator from Saline.
Very good. Well, they did not contact me either.
Senator from Miami.
I would simply say that their lobbyist did contact me.
Senator from Saline, did you have additional questions?
No, I didn't. Unless she wants to answer the one about the charging 2 different rates for hospitals would jeopardize the program because of the charging hospitals different rates.
Senator from Miami.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my understanding it doesn't jeopardize a program. It would simply be that CMS would say they would give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And I would add simply that one of the revisions or amendments that we have that's a part of Senate Bill 225 actually strikes out something because CMS said, nope, that's not compliant. And so that's part of what we're asked to be voting on the underlying bill.
Senator from Saline.
That answers my question.
Senator from Douglas. Senator for San Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question for the senator from Miami.
Ask your question.
The amendment that she's offering talks about using 1.83% of each hospital's net inpatient operating revenue for such hospitals' fiscal year 2010. The underlying bill changes that from 2010 to, I believe, the 3 years prior to the assessment year. Why would this amendment go back to the amount from fiscal year 2010?
Senator from Miami.
I appreciate the question. It's because that maintains the status quo position.
Senator
So the status quo, excuse me.
You have the floor.
The status quo, in fact, all hospitals that were being taxed currently are paying the 1.83% on the 2010 revenues. So this bill is changing, the underlying bill is changing that it's not the 2010, and it's also not just procedures that are done inside, but are also done as outpatient basis. So again, this amendment takes us exactly to the status quo.
Senator from Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have some other objections to the amendment, but particularly we're saying a hospital that was established in 2010 is going to get a much different rate from a new hospital, physician-owned hospital, that would be established in 2020. Because if you establish in 2020, then you take that first 12-month fiscal year after that, and then it's 1.83% of that. So we're not only creating winners and losers between physician-owned and other hospitals, we're creating a differential between physician-owned hospitals. I understand that costs increase. Again, I also understand that this is revenue that's collected, and then this is revenue that's spent back, giving that money to those hospitals and providers. So my understanding is it wouldn't as much affect patient bills, except in those hospitals that don't provide Medicaid and don't have emergency rooms. So I cannot support amendment that gives a few physician-owned hospitals that rate from 2010 well into the future. And we're talking about a sunset of 10 years. So this would keep their 2010 rate for 20 years.
Senator from Miami, do you wish to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will respond simply. I don't see new physician-owned hospitals on the horizon. In fact, we know in our state what we are seeing is fewer hospitals on the horizon with regard to that. And I would beg to differ with regard to not so much going to be an increase in rates, because for these 6 hospitals in particular, again, we're looking at nearly a 400% tax increase.
On the Baumgardner amendment, Senator from Reno, Senator Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for the carrier of the amendment.
State your question.
Would charging differential rates violate federal rules?
Senator from Miami.
CMS would make that determination.
Senator from Reno.
And we are singling out 6 physician-owned hospitals. What would keep us from singling out other hospitals as we went through the process?
Senator from Miami.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I already indicated, statute exempts hospitals. They've already have singled out hospitals. All critical access hospitals in the state, all hospitals run by state agencies, all state educational institutions, and any hospital operating by the Kansas Department of Aging and Disability Services. So there have already been that process of singling out.
Senator from Reno.
If this does violate CMS rules and the program goes away, what kind of cuts would we have to our physician reimbursement as well as reimbursement to hospitals?
Senator from Miami.
I appreciate the senator's questions. I originally wanted to move that this bill go right back to committee because, again, I will reiterate, there was a hearing last year, one proponent and one opponent. And the differences, the lines were drawn very distinctly as far as what supported and what opposed. And since that time, the bill wasn't worked. It didn't have a new hearing this year. New issues weren't addressed. There are so many issues that haven't been addressed, such as what's the impact going to be? Should there be Medicaid expansion in the state? Why is it that we're going to generate, with this new bill, nearly $400 million revenue to fix what legislative post-audit and what we know to be true is for 3 years in a row, the committee was overspending by $15 million. So during the calendar years of 2016, 2017, and 2018, the fund, which was administered by KDHE under the oversight of the stakeholder panel, did not fully cover the state's share of the increased cost of Medicaid payments. That was coming out of the general fund. So we already have an issue of, I guess you could say, malfeasance, where funds were spent beyond what was available. And what we are doing is to solve one problem. We are, for everyone, on average, an increase of 243%. But for this specific group, again, that the federal government identifies by its classification as being different from other hospitals, they are stuck with nearly a 400% increase.
Senator from Reno.
The carrier of the amendment indicated there was one proponent and one opponent. How many hospitals did the proponent represent?
Senator from Miami.
Mr. Chair, I am not certain the number of hospitals in the context of you take out all those exemptions. I don't know that total number. And you know what? I would venture a guess that no one on the Ways and Means Committee that attended the hearing would know either, because that kind of information wasn't available when I went online to see what had happened.
Senator from Reno.
How many hospitals did the opponent represent?
Senator from Miami.
The opponent represented those 6 hospitals, those 6 physician-owned hospitals that are in this state. There are only 6 in this state.
Senator from Reno.
Thank you.
Senator from Sedgwick, did you wish you? Senator from Sedgwick.
Thank you. I just I wanted to let the body know I'm certainly opposing this amendment, but I also, just to answer a few of these questions again, the critical access hospitals are only about 5% of Medicaid. And again, when you look at the reason why you're having a 3-year average there is because of some hospitals coming into Medicaid who they serve and some hospitals going out of that. Again, I will share that in 2010, think about many procedures, we went to the hospital and we may have spent the night there, and now we're doing more and more outpatient. So again, that's part of the change in this increase. So I also want to address that back to the panel and the transparency of this. This is why we're doing this, to make it more transparent. As I shared, the MCOs were, the reason that there was overspending on this was the inability for the agency to track the expenditures under managed care. Now we're going to be able to track those expenditures, and now we're going to have a panel that takes a look at that. So this bill is to make those corrections so that we are not spending state dollars. We are purely providing a tool for our hospitals to use. To answer that other question is, I'm sorry, I misspoke I want to make sure everybody knows when I made my opening comments, I did say that it was brought to us by the Hospital Association, and there was an opponent, but I was talking about the lobbyists that represented the physician-owned hospitals. But there were many, many hospitals that also testified, sent emails that support this very bill. I also know that those hospitals know at any given time or rotation, they could be a positive or a negative, but it depends on how many Medicaid patients that they take. Specialty hospitals, to my knowledge, they may take a few, but generally do not take the bulk of Medicaid patients. They do not have emergency rooms. Our hospitals have emergency rooms, and that's where you see a lot of these high costs. They take those patients, they have to take those patients. So again, this is a tool for those hospitals that have a significant amount of Medicaid patients, and they want to be able to pay their doctors.
Senator from Miami.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the only thing that I would add to this is physician hospitals, they do account for less Medicaid patients and Medicaid care than other hospitals, but the bulk of that work is being done by our critical access hospitals. And I want to share again with the body that the critical access hospitals are those hospitals that are exempt from paying the tax, exempt from paying this on average 243% increase.
Further question or comment? Senator from Sedgwick.
I want to reiterate, the critical access hospitals are only 5% of this Medicaid situation. Critical access hospitals are your hospitals in your very small communities. We're talking about the Salina Hospital. We're talking about the Newton Hospital. We're talking about the Manhattan Hospital. We're not talking about the very tiny hospitals. We are talking about those hospitals that have emergency rooms and people are coming to their door. We've even talked about, I'll just expand this conversation just a little bit, we've had a lot of conversation about mental health. And we know we're trying to solve a mental health issue, but part of what we discuss every time we have that conversation, we have too many people that are going through our ERs, and they don't need to be. But that's just the fact right now, and so I hope we can make that change in the future. But again, these are hospitals with emergency rooms. They have to take those people that come to the door.
Senator from Miami, wish to respond? Further questions? Senator from Shawnee, Senator Hensley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions, but I do have some comments. I think the senator from Reno made some very good points in his questioning to the carrier of this amendment. I believe that he is correct. This amendment would be in violation of CMS rules. And when he questioned about the one proponent last year, the one proponent of this bill represents hundreds of hospitals, doctors, and other healthcare professionals. The one proponent is the Kansas Hospital Association. And I certainly believe that that's an organization that we should listen to and take their advice. I will also read to you from the minutes of the Ways and Means Committee of Tuesday, February the 25th, minutes that we just met at the rail here hour and a half ago and approved these minutes. It said, Senator Denning discussed Senate Bill 225, which had a hearing in Ways and Means last session, but was then referred to the Public Health and Welfare Committee. It was just referred back to Ways and Means and is directly related to the bill that we previously heard, Senate Bill 409. Senator Denning indicated that they had not brought up Senate Bill 225 above the line due to concerns regarding possible Medicaid expansion amendments. And the minutes go on to say both Senator Denning and Senator Hensley agreed that this issue is important and that neither party will be attempting to amend in Medicaid expansion into either 225 or 409. That is an agreement that we had, and as far as I'm concerned, that agreement probably should be extended to any amendments, quite frankly,
because these bills are too important to get bogged down in the process with floor amendments such as the one that the senator from Miami is presenting, and therefore I would oppose the amendment.
Any further questions on the Baumgartner amendment? Senator from Johnson, Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask the senator from Shawnee a question.
Senator from Shawnee, we stand for question. Ask your question, Senator from Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I struggle here. This is a place of debate, and there is nobody that represents my vote in this building but me. And, you know, when the senator from Shawnee says that he thinks I've represented my vote, that I should not be able to offer amendment or comment or something on it, I think that's horrible. Horrible for democracy. He's one vote. The majority leader's one vote. People, you need to think about what he just said there. I mean, do you, as a history teacher, Senator from Shawnee, believe that that's the proper way to run a democracy, by telling other senators that they shouldn't be able to run an amendment, or two different leaders are going to control the vote in a body? Every senator ought to be able to run an amendment at any time. I'm saddened by this, to see this in the minutes, that two senators believe they can control each other. So I would like...
Senator, I think the point is made, and we're coming off of the amendment, so we will not be standing as a question. I think your point was made.
I'd be happy to answer the question.
Senator from Shawnee.
I don't oppose her offering the amendment. That's what she's doing. I just oppose her amendment. And as an individual senator, I have the right to oppose the amendment. So she can offer the amendment. Anybody can offer an amendment. The agreement that we reached, Senator Denning and I said, according to the amendments, agreed that this issue is too important and neither party will attempt to amend Medicaid expansion into this bill. But she can offer this amendment. You can offer an amendment. I don't have any problem with that. I just happen to oppose this amendment.
Further questions for the Senator from Miami. Senator from Sedgwick, do you wish to comment on that, Senator from Miami?
I would just like to reassure the body this amendment is not Medicaid expansion.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator McGinn.
Thank you. I wanted to share something. I think we're getting into this whole thing about the hospitals versus the specialty hospitals, and we've left a very important piece out. This is about paying doctors. Who wants to go to a hospital under an emergency situation and find out there is no specialty doctor, whether it's there to take care of your lungs, your heart, your digestive system, whatever? This is about paying those doctors so that we can have specialty doctors in the hospital when we need them, so we can have those procedures in those hospitals when we need them. Not everybody has the opportunity to go to a specialty hospital. And so the hospitals that are spread across our state are hospitals generally that are supported by our local communities, and they're very important to our families and our friends. So if they're not able to pay these doctors, then the doctors may have to turn around and figure out how they increase their fees. And then we've just started a whole nother, or gone down a whole nother road that we don't want to. And as the senator from Johnson says, it's expensive. So I don't think we want to go down that road. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
With no additional members seeking the floor, Senator from Miami, you may close and move your amendment.
Can I respond?
In your closing.
Okay. In my close, I would like to respond. I think, folks, if you were to visit what was prepared for us by the Division of Budget, this bill will generate $381 million in total revenue. The amendment here would reduce that amount by $5 million. I urge the body to support this amendment.
You've heard the motion on the Baumgartner amendment. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. Motion appears to fail. Motion fails. We're back on the underlying bill. Senator from Miami, did you seek the floor?
I did. I have another amendment.
You have it turned in? And
Well, actually, the good senator from Johnson turned it in, and it's S3190.
Senator, do you wish to have it read, or do you want to explain?
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to explain.
Please proceed.
Two years ago, Legislative Post Audit was asked to audit what was and wasn't happening with the stakeholder panel and the disbursement of funds. And there was significant concern about the disbursement of funds, the lack of transparency. So in 2018, Legislative Post Audit provided a very robust analysis, and they were able to illustrate that the program routinely overspent their funds. Now, I understand that in part, the underlying bill addresses this. But I think if you look at the balance of that oversight committee, you'll see that there is a need for some folks that aren't directly invested. In the context, they aren't representing the hospitals of which are receiving the funds. They aren't representing the physicians that are receiving the funds. And so my amendment asks that we include a member appointed by the President of the Senate, one member appointed by the President of the House, and one member from the Office of the Medical Inspector General appointed by the Attorney General.
Questions for the Senator from Miami? Senator from Sedgwick. Senator McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In looking at this, I don't have a problem with this amendment. If you look at the makeup of the committee, you have 3 from the hospitals, you have 3 from the Medical Society, you have 1 from every MCO, you have KDHE there. I just don't see a problem with this amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions for the Senator from Miami? Seeing none, you may move your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that this is a common sense amendment. In fact, I think if we had had this in place in years prior, perhaps we wouldn't have had that legislative post audit report that it was. So I move my amendment.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Adopted. Amendment is adopted. Back on the underlying bill. Further questions? Senator from Johnson, Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to be supporting this underlying bill, and I'll tell you why. I just believe, someone that's struggling to pay their bills, a cancer patient, someone that's got a major illness. As I seen them babies in the NIC unit, there's about 65 of them. I've seen a lot of young families that couldn't afford the extra money. We've heard this bill is going to cost $381 million, is I believe what the senator from Miami said. I don't know what the fiscal note is. I do know this is an increase. And I just rightfully cannot support another increase on our Kansas citizens for health care. Insurance is going to go up. Deductibles are going to go up. Coverage is going to go down. These people are already struggling. Record number of people that are in financial stress. And yet we're here increasing the fees a little more instead of getting to the bottom of the problem. There's answers here. There's ways of fixing this. But instead, what we're going to do is we're going to raise a bunch of money for the hospitals on the backs of the people of Kansas. They're the ones going to pay for it. The people that can't afford it. The people are struggling to get by. They're going to have to make payments for a longer period of time because we put a little more tax on. It's your decision. It's easy for me. I'm not going to support it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions? Senator from Johnson, Senator Denning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be supporting the bill, and here's why. This finance structure is used in almost every state in the union. I'm not real keen on it, to be honest with you. I think everybody knows that. It's very similar to the MCO tax, but it is a way to increase the fee schedule on Medicaid. So this doesn't have anything to do with taxing insurance or taxing an individual or anything like that. How the financing works is that the hospitals pay right now it's 1.83%, but this bill takes it up to 3% on their net revenues. So once that generates, it's right now, based on the base year, it's $163 million that the hospitals basically tax themselves on revenue. Then the federal government does match that with $221 million. So $221 million is federal funds. I realize it's borrowed. I'm not going to argue that, but it does bring $221 million back. The 163 that the hospitals tax themselves actually goes back into the form of the Medicaid fee schedule. So what this bill does is it increases the Medicaid fee schedule. And Medicaid patients, as we know, do not pay out of pocket for health care. They're too poor. So this isn't increasing the health care cost of non-Medicaid folks. It increases the fee schedule so physicians stay in the Medicaid program. If this bill fails, or if the federal government doesn't approve it, physicians that accept Medicaid take a 30% fee cut. Not physicians that accept Blue Cross and Blue Shield. They're completely sterile from this. So this is a financing structure for the Medicaid fee schedule. The hospitals do tax themselves. It goes back to them. Yeah, it doesn't go back to them dollar for dollar. It's based on their Medicaid business, so I get that as well. But to think that this is a health care cost to folks that have commercial insurance, it's simply not. Thank you.
Further questions for the Senator from Sedgwick? Senator from Cherokee, Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarification, because it kind of went back and forth. So on this tax assessment, does it not apply to every procedure, everybody that comes in, or is it singled out just for Medicaid?
Senator from Sedgwick.
It has to do with how many of the patients that they see. Hang on just a second. It's on all patients, but it's returned based on the amount of Medicaid patients that they have.
Senator from Cherokee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, because that is a lot different than what we had just heard. So if a child has leukemia, regardless whether or not it was a direct pay, an insurance payment, or Medicaid, they're going to be taxed this 3%. Is that correct?
Senator from Sedgwick.
The hospital will, that is correct, depending on how many people come through their hospital for services.
Senator from Cherokee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's definitely a lot different than what we just heard. Just to give the body a simple understanding of how insurance rates work, insurance rates, before they can increase your rates, they have to go to the insurance department and say, these are our costs. This is why we are paying more. So this is why our insurance rates need to go up. We've automatically, with this, will have at least a 3% or 1.17% increase in our insurance, because this is something they are going to be paying. They don't get to write it off. They have to pay it. So they're going to pass that on, and they're going to put that in their calculations for when they're figuring out how much it's going to cost for insurance rates. So again, we are offsetting the cost of here and putting it on people that can pay. It's a real simple problem that we have is the more government gets involved, the more expensive things get. And this is a good example of what's about ready to happen. So with that and with that understanding that it does affect everybody, I will be opposing this bill. Thank you.
Senator from Miami.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the carrier of the bill would please clarify, she mentioned that it was based on patients seen. This expands from patients seen and served in hospital, but also out of hospital. I just want the clarification. It's my understanding that the tax is encumbered on all revenues, and this will be all revenues for inpatient and outpatient care, not the number of patients, but the revenues generated from the services rendered.
Senator from Sedgwick.
So on line 10, on the first page, it is 3% of each hospital's net inpatient and outpatient operating revenue for the hospital's fiscal years 3 years prior to the assessment year.
Senator from Miami.
So again, what that really means, so not only have we changed it from just being inpatient, but we've added all outpatient, and in every hospital, the outpatient services now exceed the number of patients and services as opposed to the inpatient. But then it takes it from not the 1.83, but it takes it up to the 3%. So that, again, we're looking at the net revenues of each of those hospitals. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator from Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pretty sure I said this a couple times, and I'll say it again. We're changing it from inpatient and adding outpatient because, as I shared, our procedures, the way we do those now, have changed, and it's a good thing. We have a lot of outpatient. We get the opportunity to go in and get out of there and get to go sleep in our bed at night. So I think I've made that very clear, Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Miami, you have the floor.
Thank you. Just as a response, I'm not saying it's bad for it to be outpatient. I'm just pointing that there would have been significant revenue coming in from the tax dollars if we had left it at the 1.83 and it had been the total revenues from inpatient and the addition of outpatient. What we never have heard, what we never have seen or heard is the explanation as to why it was such a significant jump. Why we are increasing, again, by that on average 243%, knowing that some hospitals, one in particular, is paying more than 2,300% increase.
Senator from Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I want to go back to the reason for this is because the assessment program was overspent and state funds were using to make up that. We found that out. We're trying to correct that now. And so that's why there's a 3%, so that we don't end up having to be in the situation we were in before, that the hospitals will be able to take this assessment and pay their doctors without having to dip into any other kinds of funds.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask Senator from Johnson, Senator Denning, a question?
Senator from Johnson, would you stand for a question? It's optional when you're not carrying. So.
Oh, yeah, I'll stand.
Right.
The question is, does Medicaid patients, does the state pay 100% of the bill owed from the hospitals, or what's the percentage roughly they pay?
Senator Denning.
Mr. Chair, the Medicaid fee schedule, whatever it is what the state pays.
Senator Olson.
Okay, that's all I had for him. But my comment is the committee hearings we had over the summer, we had testimony in the committee that approximately 25%, so if it's a $1,000 bill, they're going to get about $250. So who do you think pays that other $750? My understanding, since the ACA's come into effect, that they can go to the insurance companies and get higher reimbursements on the 65% of the people that have health insurance that's not state. That's how it works. They're going to increase their rates for the losses. So you're saying that only Medicaid patients are going to pay that. It's not true. I'm going to pay it. Every consumer that has insurance through their work or private insurance will be the ones paying it. Their reimbursement rates are going to go up. Their deductibles are going to go up. They can't afford this. Why do you think, used to be a high deductible was $5,000. I talked to someone the other day, it's got a $15,000 deductible in a year. Tell me how one person, $15,000, that's no insurance. That's worthless insurance. We've got more people insured. I'll grant you that. We just got them insured with worthless insurance, with high deductibles. It's stuff like this that's pushing people out of the insurance market, that's putting their financial in jeopardy because these high deductibles. They can't afford them. So we're going to go and we're going to increase their rates. We heard the senator from Cherokee. He believes that that is going to be a rate increase. I believe it will be too. Common sense tells you it's going to be a rate increase. You're getting more revenue. Someone's got to pay it. You think it's going to be the Medicaid patients? No. It's going to be the private consumers that have the 65% of the policies. You guys want to expand Medicaid? That's who's going to pick up the bill. You're going to push more people out of having good health insurance, affordable health insurance, and it's going to get higher, and their deductibles are going to get higher. And this is just a piece of it. We play in the shell game. We've been doing that for 10 or 12 years with health care, and we just keep moving it farther down the road. Well, eventually, people are not going to be able to afford it. You're going to have more people uninsured because they can't afford it. There's probably going to be more people as we expand Medicaid that will be kicked off insurance because they can't afford it and the policies are just worthless, so they're not going to buy them. I'm opposing this bill. It's going to cost the consumers more money. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Brown, Senator Pyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Listening to all this debate, I have a couple questions on the net revenue. One is, what is happening to the inpatient revenues? Are they growing? And I'd like to base the answer for this, I'd like to have it based on actual numbers. What is happening to the inpatient revenues? Not outpatient. I want the inpatient first.
Senator from Sedgwick. Senator McGinn. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize. Got a phone call from my husband and it distracted me, so I didn't take it.
I can repeat
Could you repeat the question,
yes.
please?
I want to know, based on, we're talking about net revenues here and increasing the 1.83 to 3%. I want to know what net revenues are doing with inpatient. Are they rising, declining? Are they static? What are they doing? What is happening to those net revenues for inpatient care?
Senator from Sedgwick.
Well, I don't have that answer for the senator from Brown, but I can only go back to, what I see, and I would say that, maybe inpatient is stabilizing or decreasing, but again, I just look at the procedures that we can now do and send people back home. So I I apologize that either I'm not hearing the question correctly or I don't have the answer for his question.
Senator from Brown.
Well, I don't have an answer for that one. How about outpatient revenues? Are they growing, declining? Are they static? What have they done in the last several years?
Senator from Sedgwick.
Outpatient revenues, I would guess, are, I really think it's changing from inpatient to outpatient, but Mr. Chairman, I'm not an expert on that, and so I'm not prepared to answer that question.
Senator from Brown.
Well, perhaps maybe she can answer this one then. Don't seem to have an answer for what the revenues are doing. Ambulatory services is the medical procedures where they send you to the emergency room. Are those considered outpatient or inpatient?
Senator from Sedgwick.
Well, my guess would be that it would be outpatient if they go home, if it's an inpatient if they stay. That would be my thinking on that.
Senator from Brown.
Can somebody define an inpatient as being admitted and outpatient as being not admitted but there for other services? Could somebody clarify, would that be an appropriate definition?
Senator from Sedgwick.
Mr. Chairman, the revisers don't have the answer, and so I guess we would have to research to get that answer and don't have it for right now.
Senator from Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since I can't get any answers to my questions, but I do understand going from 1.8 to 3% increase on the tax, and that being used to draw down also more federal dollars, but at the same time costing us, those that go, and whether we use inpatient or outpatient services, it's going to end up costing us more. I do understand that. It would be good to have a handle on the numbers that we're talking about here so that we could actually see what's happening with inpatient revenues versus outpatient revenues. But due to the fact that there's no answers to my questions, I'll have to oppose the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator McGinn, do you wish to?
I just would like to make a short response on this. Again, we're back on the bill. Has to do with the amount of people that are coming through the door that are Medicaid, whether they're inpatient or outpatient. And they got in a deficit situation. That's why we have this bill, so we can fix that deficit situation. And the hospitals are supporting this. They've already factored this into their budgets. They're only supporting this because they've already done their homework. We act like the hospitals are new to this and they haven't even ran the numbers yet themselves.
Senator from Sedgwick, President Weigel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to stand as an individual who's opposed to Medicaid expansion, who's very much for this bill, and I want to explain why I'm for this bill. I believe in a safety net, and the safety net that we have in Kansas is the Medicaid system. Yes, we have numerous people walking into hospitals all hours of the day without insurance, with problems, a lot of mental disabilities we've already talked about, people without insurance who are covered, either they don't pay their bill or they're covered by Medicaid. Then we have those who pay insurance. But I believe in the safety net that we have established for the disabled in the state of Kansas, for the frail, for the elderly, for the pregnant women who cannot at this time work, who have children at home. We have a safety net that's in place that it's not profitable to take those patients. In fact, you can't find doctors in the private market who take Medicaid patients. We had an amendment a little bit ago for physician-owned hospitals. That's a different type of hospital in most cases. Yes, they do sometimes take Medicaid patients, but that's very, very different than your city hospitals where people with disabilities, people who are on Medicaid, and people who are absolutely have no insurance are walking in the door for health care. What this bill does is it allows the hospitals to bring in, through this tax, a total of $163 million with this tax, and with this bill that we're going to put in law, hopefully. We need it in law, we need it in statute. We passed it last year in a proviso. Now we need it in statute to cover ourselves with the CDC. Once they have this tax coming in, and they show the feds this tax is coming in, they bring back an additional $221 million and the 163 that we put in, and it goes to Medicaid patients. It goes to cover the shortfall. So if you believe in a healthy safety net, you allow the hospitals to get this done. In this way, with this bill where the feds can see what we're doing. It's not a proviso. We are taxing people, and we're using money for Medicaid patients. The reason I'm against Medicaid expansion is because you're bringing in a whole new group of people who are able-bodied workers. And I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think welfare should be a safety net for the disabled. And I think that's the moral right thing to do. This is the moral right thing to do, to make sure that our hospitals have a way to bring the money back in that the federal government willingly gives us to help pay for the people who aren't paying their bills, who are the frail, the elderly, the disabled. This is the right thing to do, to help the safety net. So I stand here as an opponent to Medicaid expansion for able-bodied workers, and I stand here to make sure this happens, that it gets in statute, that it happens this year, so that we can balance and cover those patients who do have a disability. I stand for the bill, and I hope the bill passes and becomes law.
Seeing no other member seeking recognition, Senator from Sedgwick, you may close and move. Oh, I do. Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have what I hope is a quick question for the senator from Sedgwick.
State your question.
So my understanding is that we are making this assessment onto hospitals, and it will increase the amount of money that's coming back to the state based on our Medicaid reimbursement rate. That money can be used then by those hospitals, and it may be used for those Medicaid patients. But if they have more money to cover those expenses, then in fact it will help every other patient who's going to that hospital, because that hospital doesn't have to put those costs on other people who are showing up with insurance. Is that a reasonable statement about how this bill would work?
Senator from Sedgwick.
I'm sorry.
Douglas, could you rephrase your question, restate your question?
I heard the first part of your comments. Could you just please get to the question? Thank you.
Senator from Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just asking, this will create additional funds for the hospital based on the reimbursement rate. If the hospital is getting more money for these patients, it could indeed lower the costs to every patient, because the hospital isn't having to find another way to reimburse these expenses. Is that the case?
I'm going to say
Senator
that.
from Sedgwick.
Thank you. That is correct.
I am standing in favor of this bill because it will lower our health care costs through additional funds from the federal government. I think that if we chose to expand Medicaid, we could increase that even further.
Senator from Sedgwick, you may close and move your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, let's just recap here real quickly. I know we have another bill and an appointment, but the hospital assessment program is overspent. State funds have been used to supplement the shortfall. This happened because we went from fee-for-service through KDHE to MCOs, and then it all got convoluted, and we figured out that was happening, and so now we have transparency, which is another good part of this bill. We have the Oversight Committee. Appreciate the senator from Miami for bringing her amendment. That only makes it better. So we add those people that are appointed, one from the House, one from the Senate, and somebody from the Medicaid Inspector General is appointed, in addition to the Hospital Association, the Medical Association, the Community Care Network of Kansas, one person from every MCO, and KDHE. This bill also solves the overspending problem by raising that assessment tax. Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to share also on my close that I certainly agree with the senator from Johnson. He is absolutely correct. We don't want to increase the fees on families. The hospitals have run these numbers. They understand that when they have more Medicaid people that come through their doors, they are in a deficit situation. And they also understand when they don't have more Medicaid folks in coming through the doors. They're in a positive situation. They have gone through this, they have discussed this, and they have come to this agreement. So, Mr. Chairman, I think this bill solves a problem. We don't always like these kind of situations. As the senator from Johnson, Senator Denning, made a comment, other states are doing this, and I hate using that as an example. But I only share that because we are not the only state that is experimenting on this. It pays our doctors. It pays our doctors who are in our local hospitals when we need them most. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will find the paper on my desk, and I move when the committee rises the report, it reports Senate Bill 225 as amended favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. We probably have some guests that wish this other bill was up first. Please turn your attention to SB 140 for adoption of the committee report. Chair recognizes Senator from Labette, Senator Goddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The bill was amended in committee. Therefore, I move we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion's adopted. Senator from Labette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dwight D. Eisenhower called Kansas home. Raised in Abilene, he attended West Point, rose through the ranks, attained 5-star general rank, and was a Supreme Allied Commander of the European Theater during World War II. He served 2 terms as President of the United States during the Cold War, and he is known as the father of the country's interstate highway system, and the first stretch of the system was completed just west of Topeka on I-70. Today, the Eisenhower Foundation keeps the memory of one of America's greatest heroes alive, Ike, a proud son of Kansas and a true American patriot. With the chairman's permission, I would like to yield to the senator from Saline, Senator Hardy.
Senator from Saline.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd first like to thank the hard work of the Tax Committee and the senator from Lynn to get this bill to the point where it is today. And I would also like to thank my colleagues and co-sponsors of this bill, the senator from Cloud and the senator from McPherson. I appreciate their support as well. Less than 2 months after General Dwight D. Eisenhower accepted the surrender of Nazi Germany, he returned to his hometown of Abilene and delivered a speech. In that speech, General Eisenhower, the man who orchestrated the largest naval invasion in history and liberated Europe from the iron grasp of Adolf Hitler, declared, "The proudest thing I can claim is that I am from Abilene." Think about that for a moment. General Eisenhower had literally just saved the world from unspeakable tyranny, but the thing he was most proud of was that he was able to call Abilene his home. That's because it was here in Kansas that he learned the values that shaped him into the great man he was. Eisenhower didn't learn how to be a leader at West Point or in the battlefields of Europe. Rather, it was his strong Midwestern upbringing that taught him the values he would rely on to lead our nation and the world. And now I need your help to make sure those values are passed on to future generations. While the federal government, through the National Archives, supports the overall structural, security, and preservation needs of the archival and artifact collections at the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum, it is the Eisenhower Foundation that provides funding for exhibits, programs, and events through generous contributions from donors. The Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum is a unique national institution. It is only one of 14 presidential libraries in the National Archives. The library archives contain 26 million pages of manuscripts and 64,000 museum artifacts. According to the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks and Tourism, they're spending by 214,000 museum visitors in 2017 generated $21 million in Kansas. You may be aware that the Eisenhower Foundation raised $9 million in private donations to conduct a comprehensive exhibit renovation last year. It was the largest fundraising campaign in the Eisenhower Foundation's 73-year history and the first comprehensive exhibit renovation in more than 45 years. And it reopened to the public in August and recently received critical acclaim from the Wall Street Journal. It was not easy to raise the private money, and why? The most common question donors were asking during the campaign was, what is the state of Kansas doing to support the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum? Donors were looking for the support of the state. This is our first opportunity to support this worthwhile organization. The state of Missouri has supported the Truman Presidential Library and Museum at least 7 times since 1992 with income tax credits and direct appropriations. The Eisenhower Foundation believes that support for this world-class institution is best achieved through a dual approach offered by SB 140. It is about both private support and public support. Senate Bill 140 gives the state of Kansas the opportunity to provide the public support so important to the Foundation's work. The bill would provide crucial funding to support the exhibits, educational programs, and community events at the Eisenhower Presidential Library, Museum, and Boyhood Home. With interest in Dwight D. Eisenhower increasing as new records from his military career and presidency are declassified from the library holdings, and as more K-12 students participate in its innovative Ike Education Sustaining Fund is essential to the success of the Eisenhower Museum. SB 140 makes it possible for the world and a new generation to learn more about Ike's unparalleled accomplishments as Supreme Allied Commander during World War II and the 34th President of the United States. But more importantly, it is vital that the Eisenhower Library and Museum continue to educate and current and future generations so our own Kansas children will continue to look to Ike as a role model. If our children can see what a barefoot boy from Kansas can accomplish when he works hard, it will inspire them to become leaders and heroes in their own way. The Eisenhower Foundation cannot build on its momentum without an outpouring of public support. This is our chance to leave a lasting impact that will inspire Kansas children for generations to come. I see SB 140 as an economic and tourist tool, much like the funds we provide for the state fair. We are boosting the image of Kansas when we support the Eisenhower Museum and Library. Of course, this tool will only work if the people of Kansas step up their giving to the foundation. This amount is not automatic. The state does not pay a dime if Kansas do not participate. So this bill provides a great tool to urge Kansans to be philanthropic. SB 140 is an investment in the second largest tourist attraction in Kansas. I urge you to support this bill. And with this, I would like to yield to the senator from Cloud.
Senator from Cloud, Senator Bowers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As one of the sponsors of Senate Bill 140, I'm honored to stand in support of the bill, but also to support one of the most treasured landmarks and visited locations in Kansas. Abilene is known as the Cow Town with Old Abilene Town, but many other attractions, including the Greyhound Hall of Fame and operating Colonel Parker Carousel, and of course the Brookville Hotel with their chicken meals. However, the main attraction, which brings nearly 2,000 plus people in a year, is the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum. As you heard from previous testimony, this bill would allow a taxpayer to receive a new non-refundable income tax credit contributed to the Eisenhower Foundation. The Eisenhower Foundation nonprofit was formed in 1945 after the Allied victory in Europe to create a memorial to General Eisenhower. The Boyhood Home was opened in 1947 and the museum in 1954 on Veterans Day by the foundation. Public and private entities raised $3.5 million to build the library, which opened in 1962. Today, 5 buildings on 22 acres comprise the Eisenhower Center and include the Presidential Library, Presidential Museum, Family Home, Visitor Center, and Place of Meditation. The Presidential Library honors the only 5-star general who became President of the United States and is home to a world-class research facility that caters to scholars and history enthusiasts from around the world. It contains over 678,000 feet of original motion picture film and 70,000 artifacts. and how fortunate are we to have this presidential library honoring our own Dwight Eisenhower in our state of Kansas. I'll take a moment here to mention a few new exhibits we all will be interested in this coming year. The exhibit, Eisenhower's Middle Road, spotlights a pathway for peace and prosperity that guided Ike through his 8 years in the White House. He sought balance for America, the pursuit of preservation of social gain. For instance, while refraining from government overreach, Dwight D. Eisenhower's leadership style as president reflected his practical, level-headed Midwestern roots, work from the middle to accomplish what those on the extreme saw as impossible. Another is Women Unite for Ike, which is an exhibit connecting President Eisenhower to the 19th Amendment. This exhibit explores a link between the women's suffrage movement and women's contribution to the 1952 presidential campaign. We can explore the key instrumental women who influenced Dwight Eisenhower and learn how women's roles expanded during his presidency. Once again, I'm very proud to co-sponsor Senate Bill 140 and urge the body to support the bill as well. This moment, I would like to yield to the senator from McPherson, Senator Wilborn. Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
from McPherson, Senator Wilburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've heard the reasons. I won't belabor the points. Time is getting short. The Eisenhower Center Foundation is more than just a feature in central Kansas. It is a national treasure. We all know that. I urge you to support one of the great causes in the great state of Kansas, and I'm proud to represent the Dickinson County area, and I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of this very worthy cause. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yield falls to the senator from Labette, Senator Goddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Here endeth the history lesson, and now on to the bill. Senate Bill 140, as amended, would authorize for 5 tax years a non-refundable income or financial institutional privilege tax credit equivalent to 50% of certain contributions to the Eisenhower Foundation. Credits would be capped at $25,000 for individual income taxpayers and at $50,000 for corporate income and financial institution taxpayers. The total amount of credits claimed in any fiscal year would be capped and limited to $350,000. The bill was introduced, as you heard, from Senators Hardy, Bowers, and Wilborn. Proponents for the bill included Senator Hardy, Senator Wilborn, a representative of the Eisenhower family, and a private citizen from Barrington. Hall Family Foundation was a neutral, provided neutral written testimony. There were no opponents. The bill, as it was introduced, would have provided 70% non-refundable income tax credit for all tax years of the 5-year period. And the Senate committee amended the bill to sunset the tax credits after tax year 2023, but I anticipate an amendment that will correct that date. And it reduced from 70% to 50% the amount of contributions eligible to qualify. And it extended the availability of the credits to privileged taxpayers. The fiscal note, there is some confusion over the fiscal note on this bill. Last year there was a fiscal note that was well over $500,000 as a cost to implement this. The current revised fiscal note shows a cost of $111,000. That's a one-time cost. And the revenues accruing to the state could be reduced by $350,000 a year based on the number of contributions. And I would stand for questions.
Questions for the senator from Labette, Senator from Saline.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have an amendment. It is turned in, and the number is 2172.
Would you like it read, or do you want to explain it?
I can explain it.
Proceed.
The only change in this amendment is that it strikes, it updates the bill by 1 year from 2018 to 2019 to start, and then to end at, instead of 2024, to end at 2025.
Questions for the senator from Saline?
I regard this as a technical amendment, as a friendly amendment.
Seeing nobody standing for recognition, Senator, you may close and move your amendment.
I move my amendment.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion is adopted. Back on the bill. Further questions for the senator from Labette? Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a question, but I do rise in support of this bill. It's good legislation. It makes sense. We can quote President Eisenhower when he was given a speech in London. He says, "I come from the very heart of America." He was very proud of that. We're proud to have him as a Kansan, and we should take care of this facility, and this bill will help do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Haley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too am rising, I think, to support and join the support. I wanted to ask the senator from Labette if I could, just for a point of clarification on the change in the fiscal note. There was a little unease, frankly, on our part, on my part, of a $500,000 fiscal note, and certainly hearing the senator from Labette represent that the implementation now is closer to $100,000 is certainly it was certainly good to hear. And I'm wondering if he might clarify briefly how we reached the difference from the initial fiscal and then this revised one.
Senator from Labette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last year, when the fiscal impact was provided, there was a contractor that was in charge of making the changes to the software and computer systems. I originally thought that that was just an out of order in terms of how much that was going to cost, and we asked for a revised estimate, and now the work will be done in-house, and that's why it came down $400 and some thousand.
Senator from Wyandotte.
Good work, Mr. Chair. Good work to the senator from Labette and those who were monitoring this. That is a one-time charge as we ramp the system up to make the adjustment to receive the contributions. Would there be one, Mr. Chair, on the back end to retrofit or to move back after this sunsets, or would that only be the one time to correct it? So that there's only a one time that we need to change our system for the first one, or would there be an additional one, Mr. Chair?
Senator from Labette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not aware of any charge on the back end. I've never seen that in a fiscal impact note on a bill that would sunset.
Senator from Wyandotte.
May I reiterate, please, my hearty support for this legislation, and very much support it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Senator from Shawnee, Senator Rucker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the 1850s, my ancestors moved to southern Dickinson County, and 7 generations later, they are still farming, they are still ranching in Dickinson County, Kansas. As a very small boy, I went to Abilene for the dedication of the Eisenhower Library and was physically present when President Eisenhower addressed the audience on that occasion. And I remember the excitement that everyone experienced as they had the opportunity to actually see the President of the United States from home. I was also there the day, physically there, the day that they brought Ike home to his eternal rest and his resting place. Once again, I saw the likes of General Bradley, Omar Bradley, and Charles de Gaulle physically there honoring the President of the United States as he went to his rest. It's with great pride that I call myself a territorial Kansan by progeny, and I rise in support of the Senate bill.
Seeing no one further, Senator from Labette, you may close and move your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One final comment. The D-Day invasion was a critical day, a tremendous day in our nation's history. Part of the exhibit at the museum is the table, the planning table, that was actually used by General Eisenhower and his staff, and I'd encourage everybody to go by there and give it a little pat. Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports Senate Bill 140 as amended favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The motion passes. Chair recognizes Majority Leader Denning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
The clerk will read the committee report.
On motion of Senator Denning, the Senate resolved itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration on bills on the calendar under the heading of General Orders with Senator Masterson in the chair. Recommended SB 255, SB 409 be amended by the adoption of the committee report and the bills be passed as amended. SB 225 be amended by the adoption of the committee report, be further amended on the motion of Senator McGinn and Senator Baumgartner, and the bill be passed as further amended. SB 140 be amended by the adoption of the committee report, be further amended on motion of Senator Hardy, and the bill be passed as further amended.
The chair recognizes the senator from Butler, Senator Masterson, to adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. The chair recognizes the majority leader from Johnson County, Senator Denning.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I move an emergency be declared, the rules suspended, and the following bills be advanced to final action and roll call. Senate Bill 255, Senate Bill 409, Senate Bill 225, and Senate Bill 140.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. Consideration of appointments. The chair recognizes the majority leader from Johnson County, Senator Denning.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. In compliance with Senate Rule 55, the appointment on page 9 of the calendar is ready for consideration. Are there any questions? Mr. Vice President, I move the appointment be confirmed as recommended by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs.
We will hold for final action. We are now ready for final action. On this roll call, we will take the following. The appointment on page 9, Weishire. The bills on page 10 and 11. Senate Bill 255, Senate Bill 409, Senate Bill 225, and Senate Bill 140. The clerk will read the name and the titles.
By the Governor, Adjunct General David Weishire. SB 255, an act concerning the University of Kansas Medical Center. SB 409, an act concerning skilled nursing care facilities. SB 225, an act concerning the hospital provider assessment. SB 140, an act concerning taxation.
The clerk will call the roll.
Alley. Baumgartner. Berger. Billinger. Boyer. Bowers. Braun. Denning. Dahl. Estes. Vascadeau. Francisco. Givens. Goddard. Haley. Hardy. Hawk. Hensley. Hildebrand. Holland. Kirshen. Longbine. Lynn. Masterson. McGinn. Miller.
Mr. Vice President, I vote aye, including Senate Bill 409.
Olson. Peterson. Petty. Pyle. Rucker. Skubal. Solentrop. Sykes. Taylor. Thompson. Tyson. Wagle. Ware. Wilborn.
Has every senator had an opportunity to vote? Does any senator wish to explain their vote? Does any senator wish to change their vote? Does any senator wish to explain their vote? Seeing none, the clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Forty voting in favor and 0 opposed to Weishauer, Senate Bill 140, Senate Bill 255. 35 voting in favor and 5 opposed to Senate Bill 409. 31 voting in favor and 9 opposed to Senate Bill 225. These measures, having received the required constitutional majority, are hereby declared passed and confirmed. There having been an objection to House Bill 2595 appearing on the consent calendar, the bill will be removed and placed on general orders. If anyone has a question about that, feel free to see me. We'll refer back to that order of business, introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
Senate Bill 483 by Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning farm wineries. Senate Bill 484 by Committee on Ways and Means, an act concerning public assistance. Senate Bill 485 by Committee on Ways and Means, an act concerning public assistance. Senate Bill 486 by Committee on Assessment and Taxation, an act concerning property taxation. Senate Bill 487 by Committee on Ways and Means, an act concerning state property.
This constitutes introduction of Senate Bill 483 through Senate Bill 487. Reports of standing committees. The clerk will read.
Madam President, the Committee on Financial Institutions and Insurance begs leave to submit the following report. The following appointment was referred to and considered by the committee, and your committee recommends that the Senate approve and consent to such appointment. Member State Banking Board, Justin Nichols, to fill a term expiring on March 15th, 2023. Senator Olson, Chairperson.
Are there announcements? Seeing no announcements, the chair recognizes the Majority Leader from Johnson County, Senator Denning.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I move the Senate adjourn pro forma until 8 a.m. on Friday, March 6, 2020.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. The Senate is adjourned.